My name is Kristen, 32 years old, and family dinners have always been a battlefield for me. That night was supposed to be special, celebrating Dad's 65th birthday. Instead, it became the night I finally snapped after years of living in my sister Sophia's shadow. When Dad proudly announced, "Your sister is successful and responsible unlike you. She doesn't need help from anyone," I quietly replied. "Perfect. Then my $4,000 monthly transfers can stop today." Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, hit subscribe, and stay tuned to see how my family's perfect facade crumbled that night. Growing up as the second daughter in my family was like living as a supporting character in the Sophia show. My sister is 5 years older than me, and from my earliest memories, she was the golden child who could do no wrong. Every conversation at our dinner table seemed to revolve around her latest achievement, her newest talent, or how bright her future would be. Sophia excelled at everything she touched. She brought home straight. As, without seeming to try, played the piano like she was born with the keys under her fingers, and dominated every sport she attempted. Our parents beamed with pride at her recitals and competitions while I sat quietly in the audience, clapping along with everyone else, wondering if I would ever make them smile that way. The differences in how we were treated became more obvious as we got older. When Sophia reached high school age, our parents enrolled her in Westlake Academy, an expensive private school known for sending students to Ivy League colleges. They stretched their finances thin to afford the tuition, uniforms, and extracurricular activities. 2 years later, when it was my turn to start high school, I was simply registered at the local public school. When I asked why, Dad casually said, "Sophia needs the advantages more than you do. She has real potential." Those words cut deep, but they were just one moment in a lifetime of similar experiences. On my 16th birthday, my parents gave me a card with $20 inside. For Sophia's 16th, they had thrown a surprise party with 50 guests and given her a used car. When I graduated elementary school, no one came to the ceremony because it coincided with one of Sophia's tennis tournaments. When I won second place in a regional science fair in 8th grade, my father glanced at my certificate and said, "Nice. Sophia won first place in her year." Every milestone in my life seemed to be measured against Sophia's accomplishments, and somehow I always fell short. My mother was slightly more attentive, occasionally slipping me extra dessert or whispering "good job" when I showed her my report card. But even she ultimately deferred to my father's judgment, never challenging his obvious favoritism. I tried so hard to win my father's approval. I joined the debate team because I heard him say he had been a debater in college. I took advanced math classes because he was an engineer. I even tried learning tennis, his favorite sport. Nothing worked. He would watch my matches with a distracted expression, checking his watch every few minutes, clearly wishing he were somewhere else. By the time I was 15, I had given up trying to be the favorite. Instead, I focused on becoming completely self-sufficient. If my family wasn't going to support me emotionally, I would learn to support myself. I started babysitting for neighbors, saving every dollar. I studied hard, not for their approval anymore, but for the scholarships that would be my ticket to independence. I watched as Sophia continued to be showered with praise and privileges. When she was accepted to Stanford, my parents took out a second mortgage on our house to help pay her tuition. They framed her acceptance letter and hung it in the living room where everyone who visited could see it. Meanwhile, my own achievements collected dust in a box under my bed. The strangest part was that Sophia wasn't even particularly kind to me. She treated me like an inconvenience, someone who took up space and resources that could have been hers. She borrowed my clothes without asking and returned them stained. She volunteered me for chores she didn't want to do. When her friends came over, she introduced me as just my sister, if she introduced me at all. Despite all of this, a part of me still craved my family's approval. Every now and then, I would show my father an A on a test or tell him about a teacher who had praised my work. He would nod absently and change the subject to Sophia's latest accomplishment. It was like throwing pebbles into an ocean, hoping to make a wave. By the time I was 17, I had accepted my role in the family. I was the other daughter, the backup plan, the one who wasn't quite good enough. But in accepting this reality, I also made a promise to myself one day I would build a life so undeniably successful that not even my father could ignore it. And I would do it all on my own without a penny of their help. After graduating high school with honors that went largely uncelebrated by my family, I faced a crucial decision about college. Unlike Sophia, who had her Ivy League education fully funded by our parents, I knew I would need to make my own way. I had managed to secure a partial scholarship to State University, but it would only cover about half of my tuition. The rest, along with living expenses, would be entirely my responsibility. I spent that summer working 2 jobs simultaneously. During the day, I waited tables at a busy downtown restaurant where the tips were decent if you could handle the demanding customers. At night, I stocked shelves at a 24-hour supermarket. Between shifts, I would collapse into bed for a few hours before starting all over again. By August, I had saved enough to cover my first semester's expenses, with a small emergency fund set aside. When it came time to choose my major, I was strategic rather than sentimental. I had always loved literature and history, but I knew those passions wouldn't necessarily translate to financial independence. After researching starting salaries and job prospects across different fields, I settled on business administration with a focus on marketing and digital strategy. The digital economy was booming, and I recognized that these skills would be valuable regardless of which industry I ultimately entered. My college years were a constant juggling act. While other students enjoyed the full college experience joining clubs and attending parties, I divided my time between classes, studying, and working. I found a job at the university library that allowed me to study during slow periods, and I picked up freelance social media management gigs for local businesses. Every dollar I earned went toward tuition, rent books, or groceries. I became an expert at living frugally, cooking large batches of pasta and rice dishes that would last for several meals, buying clothes exclusively from thrift stores, and finding free entertainment options around campus. Meanwhile, Sophia continued to enjoy the financial support of our parents well into her 20s. After graduating from Stanford, she decided to pursue a master's degree in art history, a program with limited job prospects, but that appealed to her interest in European culture. Our parents paid for not only her tuition, but also a semester abroad in Paris, where she lived in a charming apartment in the Marais district and posted endless photos of herself at cafes and museums. When she complained about the small size of her Parisian flat, our father immediately increased her monthly allowance. When I graduated with honors summa cum laude, I invited my family to the ceremony more out of obligation than hope. To my surprise, they all attended, though. My father spent most of the event checking his phone for work emails. My mother had arranged a small celebration at a local restaurant afterward, but the conversation quickly turned to Sophia's plans to potentially pursue a PhD. My achievement, years in the making and earned through countless sacrifices, was a brief interlude in the ongoing Sophia saga. After graduation, the reality of adult life hit me hard. Entry-level positions in marketing paid barely enough to cover rent in a shared apartment with 2 roommates in a less desirable part of town. I continued to live frugally, bringing lunch to work every day using public transportation instead of owning a car and declining invitations to expensive social events. Every month, I managed to put a small amount into savings, slowly building my financial safety net. I found a job at a small digital marketing startup called Next Level Digital. The salary was modest, but the opportunity to learn was immense. The company had only 15 employees, which meant everyone wore multiple hats and gained experience across different aspects of the business. I threw myself into the work, arriving early and staying late, volunteering for the challenging projects that others avoided. My boss, Tara, noticed my dedication and began giving me increasingly important responsibilities. In those early professional years, I developed skills that would later prove invaluable. I learned how to analyze market trends, create compelling content strategies, manage client relationships, and measure campaign performance. I also learned how to present my ideas, confidently negotiate effectively, and navigate office politics. Every new skill I mastered felt like another brick in the foundation of my future independence. I built a network of professional contacts, attending industry events and connecting with people on LinkedIn. I took free online courses to expand my knowledge of emerging digital tools and platforms. While my peers complained about workplace challenges, I embraced them as opportunities to prove my worth. I knew that, unlike Sophia, I had no safety net, no parental bailout waiting if I failed. My success would be entirely self-made, which made me both terrified and determined. As the years passed, I watched from a distance as Sophia continued to drift through life with our parents' unwavering support. She took an unpaid internship at an art gallery after completing her master's, then quit after 3 months because the gallery director was too demanding. She traveled through Europe for half a year on what she called a necessary creative sabbatical. Through it all, our parents never questioned her choices or suggested she might need to support herself. Their faith in her potential remained unshaken, even as evidence of her lack of direction mounted. I, on the other hand, was building something real brick by brick, day by day. It wasn't glamorous or Instagram-worthy, but it was mine, and I was just getting started. 5 years into my career, everything changed. I had been quietly developing a side project alongside my regular work at Next Level Digital. During client research, I had identified a significant gap in the market for small businesses trying to compete with larger companies online. Most digital marketing tools were either too expensive, too complex, or didn't address the specific needs of small local businesses. Over countless nights and weekends, I built a prototype for a simplified marketing automation platform specifically designed for small businesses with limited budgets and technical expertise. I called it Local Boost. The platform would allow small businesses to create, schedule, and analyze digital marketing campaigns across multiple channels, all from an intuitive dashboard that required no specialized knowledge. I presented my idea at a regional tech startup competition, not expecting much beyond some constructive feedback. To my shock, my presentation caught the attention of Alicia Hernandez, a venture capitalist known for her investments in female-founded tech companies. After the event, she approached me with her business card and asked for a private demonstration of Local Boost the following week. That meeting changed my life. Alicia saw the potential in both the product and in me. 3 weeks and several intense due diligence meetings later, her firm offered to invest $1.5 million in exchange for 20% equity in the company. The contract was signed on my 31st birthday, a gift I had given myself through years of hard work and perseverance. With the investment secured, I left Next Level Digital on good terms and dedicated myself fully to Local Boost. I rented a small office space and hired a team of 5 talented people who shared my vision. The product launched 6 months later to immediate positive feedback from early users. Small businesses loved the simplicity and affordability, and word of mouth drove our user base to grow faster than I had projected in even my most optimistic forecasts. By the end of our first year, Local Boost had over 3,000 paying subscribers and was featured in several industry publications as a game changer for small business marketing. My team had grown to 15 people, and we had moved to a larger office space to accommodate our expansion. I was reinvesting most of the profits back into the business, but still paid myself enough to finally enjoy some of the comforts I had denied myself for so long. I bought a modest but beautiful 2-bedroom condo in a nice neighborhood furnished with pieces I actually loved rather than whatever was cheapest. I traded in my aging laptop for a high-performance model that didn't freeze during video calls. I purchased a reliable car, nothing flashy but new and under warranty. For the first time in my adult life, I checked my bank account without anxiety. I had built financial security through my own efforts, and the feeling was indescribable. News of my success eventually reached my parents through mutual family friends. Suddenly, they began calling more often, asking about that internet business of yours. My father, who had barely acknowledged my career for years now, wanted detailed explanations of my business model and growth strategy. My mother proudly told her friends that her younger daughter was an entrepreneur, a word she pronounced with careful precision as if it were in a foreign language. Their newfound interest in my life might have been gratifying if it hadn't been so transparently tied to my financial success. They hadn't cared about my struggles, my sacrifices, or my small victories along the way. Only now, when I had achieved undeniable success, did they seem to remember they had a second daughter. While my star was rising, Sophia's carefully constructed façade was beginning to crumble. Her pattern of brief employment followed by extended breaks had continued through her late 20s and into her 30s. She had married Julian, a charming but financially irresponsible man she met during her European travels in a lavish ceremony paid for by our parents. The marriage lasted less than 3 years before ending in a bitter divorce that left Sophia emotionally devastated and financially vulnerable. Julian had accumulated significant debt during their marriage, much of it in joint accounts. The art gallery, where Sophia had finally secured a position as an assistant curator, was struggling financially, and laid off half its staff, including her. Suddenly, at 36 years old, my sister found herself unemployed in debt and facing the prospect of having to support herself completely for the first time in her life. I was in the middle of a strategy meeting when my phone lit up with Sophia's name. We spoke perhaps twice a year, usually brief surface-level conversations during holidays. I excused myself from the meeting and answered with concern, assuming there must be an emergency for her to call me on a Tuesday afternoon. "Kristen," she said, her voice thick with tears. "I need your help. I wouldn't ask if I had anywhere else to turn." Over the next hour, Sophia revealed the extent of her situation. She was 3 months behind on rent for her luxury apartment. The credit cards were maxed out. Julian had left her responsible for nearly $70,000 in joint debt. She had been pretending everything was fine to our parents too, ashamed to admit her failures after years of being the golden child. "They always said I was the successful one," she sobbed. "How can I tell them that I'm about to be evicted, that I can barely afford groceries? Dad would be so disappointed in me." Despite our complicated history, my heart went out to her. I knew what it was like to struggle, to feel like you're drowning financially. I also understood the crushing weight of our father's disappointment, something Sophia had been sheltered from her entire life. "How much do you need to get back on your feet?" I asked. The number she named was substantial. $4,000 a month would cover her rent, minimum debt payments, and basic living expenses while she looked for another job. It was a significant sum, but thanks to Local Boost's success, it was an amount I could afford. "I'll help you," I said after a moment of consideration. "But I want to be clear that this is temporary, until you find stable employment." Sophia's relief was palpable through the phone. Thank you. I promise I'll pay you back someday. And please don't tell Mom and Dad about this. I couldn't bear for them to know how badly I've failed." I agreed to keep our arrangement private, understanding her desire to maintain the image our parents had of her. We set up a monthly transfer directly to her bank account, and I offered to help her update her resume and practice for interviews. She gratefully accepted the money, but politely declined the career assistance, assuring me she had good leads on appropriate positions in the art world. Little did I know that this financial lifeline would stretch far beyond the temporary arrangement I had envisioned, or that Sophia had no intention of changing the lifestyle to which she had become accustomed. What began as a temporary solution to help my sister through a difficult period gradually transformed into a permanent arrangement. Month after month, I transferred $4,000 to Sophia's account, initially believing each payment might be the last. "I have a promising interview next week," she would tell me. Or, "The gallery director seemed really interested in my application." There was always a prospect on the horizon, yet somehow, none of these opportunities ever materialized into actual employment. As the first year of our secret arrangement passed, I began to notice troubling patterns. Despite claiming financial hardship, Sophia's social media accounts displayed a life of considerable comfort and even luxury. There were posts of weekend brunches at upscale restaurants, a new designer handbag that I knew retailed for over $1,000, and even a spontaneous weekend trip to Miami with friends. When I gently questioned these expenses during our monthly check-in calls, she always had justifications ready. The brunch was treated by a friend. The handbag was a convincing replica. The Miami trip had been booked with points before her. Financial troubles. I wanted to believe her, but doubt crept in. Still, I continued the payments. Partly because I remembered my own financial struggles and couldn't bear the thought of my sister facing eviction or hunger, but also because I had made a commitment and I prided myself on keeping my word. Meanwhile, Sophia maintained an elaborate fiction with our parents. Rather than admitting her unemployment and divorce challenges, she crafted a narrative of continued success. During family calls, she spoke confidently about gallery projects and art acquisitions that I suspected were entirely fabricated. She mentioned client meetings and business trips that aligned suspiciously well with her actual shopping excursions and vacations funded by my monthly transfers. Our parents absorbed these stories without question, their faith in their golden child unshakable. My father would nod approvingly during her tales, occasionally interjecting with, "That's my girl," or "Always knew you'd make a name for yourself in the art world." My mother would beam with pride, asking for details about the supposedly important people Sophia claimed to meet through her non-existent job. The contrast between how they received her fictional achievements versus my actual business success was striking and painful. When I shared genuine milestones from Local Boost, like securing our 5,000th customer or being featured in Business Insider, my father would offer a perfunctory, "That's nice," before changing the subject often back to Sophia. The most difficult moments came during family gatherings. 2 years into our arrangement, we all met for Thanksgiving at my parents' house. I had just closed a second round of funding for Local Boost, valuing the company at $12 million, news that received a brief acknowledgement from my father before he turned his attention to Sophia's latest stories. Sophia was telling us about the private showing she organized for that Saudi prince, he said, cutting off my attempt to explain a new feature we were developing. Imagine my daughter advising royalty on their art investments. I glanced at Sophia, who avoided my eyes as she launched into an elaborate tale about a Middle Eastern royal with an interest in contemporary American artists. I knew with absolute certainty that this story was fabricated. The previous week, she had called to ask if I could send the monthly transfer a few days early because she wanted to book a spa weekend. What truly hurt was not just the lies, but how Sophia often subtly undermined me, even as she depended on my financial support. "Of course, not everyone can appreciate fine art," she said during that same Thanksgiving dinner. "Some people are more commercial in their thinking." She glanced at me with a small smile. "But we need those people too. Someone has to keep the economy running while the rest of us focus on culture and beauty." My father chuckled appreciatively at this thinly veiled dig while my mother served more cranberry sauce as if nothing uncomfortable had been said. I sat there silently seething, wondering if they would still find Sophia's artistic sensibilities so impressive if they knew I was subsidizing her cultured lifestyle. After each family interaction, I would question why I continued to support someone who showed me so little respect or gratitude. The $4,000 monthly had become a significant sum over time, money that could have been invested back into my business or saved for my own future. Yet the thought of cutting Sophia off filled me with conflict. Would I be responsible if she lost her apartment? Would our parents blame me if they finally discovered the truth? Was I enabling her continued deception by providing this financial safety net? There were moments when I nearly ended the arrangement. Once, after Sophia referred to my business as that little website thing during a family phone call, I drafted a message informing her that the next transfer would be the last, but I never sent it. Despite everything, she was still my sister, and years of conditioning had taught me that I was supposed to be the responsible one, the one who sacrificed, the one who fixed problems rather than causing them. So, the payments continued, and Sophia's fictional life of gallery success expanded. She curated imaginary exhibitions, discovered promising new artists, and networked with influential figures in the art world, all while actually spending her days shopping, meeting friends for long lunches, and planning her next vacation funded by the sister she constantly belittled. By the 2-year mark of our arrangement, I estimated I had transferred nearly $100,000 to Sophia, with nothing to show for it except her continued deception of our parents and her increasingly lavish lifestyle. I was enabling a situation that benefited no one in the long term, not even Sophia herself, who was becoming more dependent rather than less with each passing month. Something needed to change, but I wasn't yet sure what that change should look like or how to initiate it without causing the family earthquake I had spent my life trying to avoid. The precarious balance couldn't hold forever, but I continued to maintain it month after month, transfer after transfer, lie after lie. The invitation to celebrate my father's 65th birthday arrived via my mother's text message, with a note emphasizing that attendance was mandatory, not optional. Family gatherings had become increasingly difficult for me, as the gap between reality and the fiction my sister presented grew wider, but this was an important milestone I couldn't miss without raising questions. I spent weeks selecting the perfect gift, eventually settling on a vintage watch, similar to one my father had inherited from his own father, but had lost years ago. It was expensive, perhaps unnecessarily so, but part of me still hoped that the right gift might finally earn his genuine approval. I had it professionally restored and engraved with his initials wrapped in premium paper, with a handwritten card expressing sentiments I wasn't sure I fully felt anymore. The evening of the celebration arrived, and I drove to my parents' suburban home with a mixture of dread and determination. I had promised myself I would focus on making the night special for my father, avoiding any topics that might lead to comparison or conflict with Sophia. I arrived exactly on time, gift in hand, wearing a new dress I had purchased specifically for the occasion. My mother greeted me with her usual distracted affection, accepting the carefully wrapped package with a quick, "Oh, this looks lovely, dear. Could you help me finish setting the table? Sophia's running late as usual." The offhand comment revealed the double standard that had defined our childhoods. Sophia's tardiness was accepted as a charming quirk, whereas I had once been lectured for 10 minutes about respect and consideration after arriving 5 minutes late to a family breakfast. I helped set the table with the good china, arranged the flowers I had brought for my mother, and made polite conversation with my father, who was more interested in watching the basketball game on television than engaging with me. When the doorbell finally rang an hour after the scheduled start time, my parents brightened immediately. Sophia swept in like a celebrity, making an entrance air, kissing my mother, hugging my father, and offering a casually insincere "hey sis" in my direction. She carried no gift, explaining that something special is being delivered next week, a promise I doubted she intended to fulfill. She had clearly come directly from a salon appointment, her hair freshly colored and styled, wearing an outfit that I recognized from an expensive boutique I could now afford, but would never justify spending so much on. My father beamed at her as if she had hung the moon, immediately asking about her latest gallery acquisition and seemingly forgetting his basketball game entirely. My mother hurried to serve the dinner she had kept warm during Sophia's extended absence, arranging the plates with extra care on Sophia's setting. Throughout the appetizer and main course, the conversation revolved almost exclusively around Sophia's fabricated career developments and social connections. She described a recent gallery showing that had allegedly attracted several celebrities, complete with specific details about conversations and interactions that I knew were entirely invented. My parents hung on every word, asking questions that allowed her to elaborate further on her fictitious success. When my father finally turned to me, it was with the air of someone dutifully checking a box. "And how's your internet business going, Kristen? Still doing okay?" Before I could answer, Sophia interjected. "It's so cute how Kristen found her little niche. Not everyone can appreciate real art, but there's definitely a market for commercial digital things." She waved her hand vaguely, dismissing an industry she clearly knew nothing about. Rather than defending me, my father nodded sagely. "Different paths for different people. Your sister has always been practical-minded." The word practical hung in the air like an indictment, a pale, boring virtue compared to Sophia's supposed creativity and sophistication. As the dinner progressed and wine flowed freely, my father became increasingly effusive in his praise of Sophia. After she finished another elaborate story about an important client, he raised his glass in a toast. "To my firstborn," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "Your mother and I were just saying the other day how impressed we are with everything you've accomplished. You've made your own way in a competitive field, built a name for yourself through talent and hard work." He turned to me briefly, then back to Sophia. "Your sister is successful and responsible, unlike you. She doesn't need help from anyone." The room seemed to tilt slightly. 2 years of mounting frustration, decades of unfair comparison, and the sheer audacity of this particular lie, in the face of the monthly transfers that supported Sophia's entire lifestyle, suddenly crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. This wasn't just about sibling rivalry or parental favoritism anymore. It was about fundamental dishonesty that had warped our entire family dynamic. I set down my fork, carefully took a sip of water, and responded in a calm, measured tone that belied the emotional storm within me. "Perfect," I said, looking directly at Sophia. "Then my $4,000 monthly transfers can stop today." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. My father's glass froze halfway to his lips. Sophia's face drained of color so rapidly I thought she might faint. "What are you talking about?" my father finally asked, his voice unnaturally high. Sophia recovered quickly, forcing a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Kristen is just making a weird joke." "Right, Kristen." Her eyes pleaded with me, but something had shifted irreversibly inside me. I was done protecting her lies at my own expense. "No joke," I replied, still maintaining that eerie calm. "For the past 2 years, I've been sending Sophia $4,000 every month to cover her rent bills and living expenses. She lost her job at the gallery years ago. She hasn't worked since before her divorce. Every story she's told you about her career for the past 2 years has been completely fabricated. Sophia pushed back from the table violently, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You promised you wouldn't tell them, she shouted, abandoning all pretense. You promised. My mother's hands flew to her mouth. Is this true, Sophia? My father shook his head in disbelief. This can't be right. Sophia, tell us this isn't true. Instead of responding to them, Sophia turned on me with fury in her eyes. How could you do this to me? You've ruined everything I trusted you. The irony of her accusation wasn't lost on me. You trusted me to fund your lifestyle while you continued to lie to our parents and belittle me to my face. That wasn't trust, Sophia. That was manipulation. My father's confusion was rapidly turning to anger, but surprisingly, it wasn't directed at Sophia. Why would you make up something like this, he demanded of me. Are you so jealous of your sister's success that you need to tear her down? That was the moment I realized how deep the dysfunction in our family truly ran. Faced with direct evidence that his golden child had been lying for years, his first instinct was still to assume I was the problem. I reached for my phone, opened my banking app, and slid it across the table to him. Look at the transaction history, every month like clockwork. Ask Sophia where she thinks her rent money has been coming from, if not from me. As my father scrolled through the undeniable evidence of the transfers, Sophia began to cry loud, dramatic sobs that had always worked to redirect attention and sympathy toward her throughout our childhood. But this time they fell flat in the face of the exposed truth. The carefully constructed illusion of our family dynamic was shattering before our eyes, and none of us knew how to process the reality that was emerging from the broken pieces. Sophia's crying quickly transformed into rage. She pushed her chair back with such force that it toppled over, clattering against the dining room floor. You had no right, she screamed, pointing an accusatory finger at me. No right to humiliate me like this. My mother, always the peacemaker, tried to intervene. Please, can we all just calm down and talk about this rationally? But Sophia was beyond reason. There's nothing to talk about. Kristen has ruined everything because she's always been jealous of me. She pretends to help, but really just wanted to control me to make me dependent on her, so she could have this moment. My father, still holding my phone with the damning evidence of monthly transfers, looked back and forth between us, his worldview visibly crumbling. I don't understand, he said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. Sophia, are you saying these payments are real, that you haven't been working at the gallery? Ask her about the Saudi prince, I suggested, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Or the celebrity clients, or the exclusive exhibition she supposedly curated last month. My father turned to Sophia, whose fury was giving way to panic as she realized the full extent of what was being exposed. Is any of it true, he asked? Any of what you've been telling us about your career? The silence that followed was answer enough. Sophia's shoulders slumped, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I tried to find another job. I really did. But nothing paid enough to maintain my lifestyle, and I couldn't bear to disappoint you. So you lied, my father stated flatly. For years. And let us believe Kristen was the less successful one. My mother added, the implications of this deception dawning on her, all while she was supporting you financially. Sophia began crying again, but these tears seemed genuine, the tears of someone facing consequences perhaps for the first time. I was going to pay her back someday, and I was going to tell you both the truth when I got back on my feet. When would that be? I asked. It's been 2 years, Sophia. 2 years of lies, of taking my money while continuing to belittle me in front of Mom and Dad. 2 years of letting them believe I was the disappointing daughter while you were the successful one. My father set down my phone and rubbed his temples, looking suddenly older than his 65 years. I need to understand exactly what's been happening, he said. From the beginning. Over the next hour, the full story emerged in painful detail. I explained how Sophia had called me in desperate financial straits after her divorce and job loss. How I had agreed to help temporarily while she found new employment. How that temporary arrangement had stretched into years, with no end in sight. Sophia, once her initial fury subsided, admitted to fabricating elaborate stories about her non-existent career to maintain her status as the golden child. She confessed to using my money not just for necessities but for luxury purchases vacations, and maintaining appearances. I just couldn't face being a failure, she said through tears. Not after being the successful one my whole life. Not after hearing how proud you both were of me. My mother, who had been quietly absorbing all of this, suddenly asked a question that surprised me. "Did you know about this?" she asked my father. "Did you suspect anything?" He shook his head, but there was something in his expression that made me wonder if he was being entirely truthful. Had he chosen to believe Sophia's increasingly implausible stories because the alternative was too difficult to accept? "I just thought," he started, then stopped. "I always believed Sophia had a special talent, a unique potential. I never questioned where her money was coming from because I assumed she was doing well in her field." "And you assumed I wasn't doing well in mine," I added quietly, despite all evidence to the contrary. He couldn't meet my eyes. I may have misjudged some things. An understatement so profound it would have been laughable in any other context. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. "I knew you were doing better than your father acknowledged," she admitted. "I read that article about your company in the business section. I was so proud. But I didn't want to contradict your father's perceptions." Another revelation: my mother had seen the truth, but chosen family peace over honesty. It was hard not to feel betrayed by that as well. Sophia, sensing the tide of sympathy moving away from her, made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. "I'll get a job immediately," she promised. "I'll pay back every cent to Kristen. This was just a temporary setback. I'll make you proud again, Dad." The again hung in the air, a tacit acknowledgement that she understood her pedestal had crumbled. My father was uncharacteristically silent, processing decades of family dynamics being rewritten before his eyes. When he finally spoke, his words surprised me. "I think I need some time to think about all this," he said. He turned to me with an expression I'd rarely seen, directed my way uncertainty, possibly even respect. "Kristen, I may have been incorrect in my assessment of you." Coming from my father, this halting near apology was as close to a full mea culpa as I was likely to get. I nodded, too emotionally exhausted to push for more in that moment. I stood up, gathering my purse and jacket. "I need some space," I said simply. "This has been a lot to process." Sophia looked panicked. "What about next month's transfer? My rent is due on the 1st. The sheer audacity of this question, after everything that had been revealed, left everyone speechless. It was the perfect encapsulation of how entitled she had become, how disconnected from the consequences of her actions. "I think that's a conversation for another day," I replied, already moving toward the door. "You might want to start looking at more affordable apartments." I left my parents' house that night with mixed emotions. Relief that the truth was finally out. Anger at years of deception and unfairness. Uncertainty about what our family would look like moving forward. And underneath it all, a small, quiet voice, wondering if I had done the right thing by exposing Sophia's lies, or if I had irrevocably damaged whatever dysfunctional but familiar bonds had held us together. The week that followed was chaotic. My phone filled with messages and missed calls from both parents and Sophia. My mother's texts were conciliatory, asking if we could talk things through calmly. My father's were brief and awkward, clearly composed by a man unaccustomed to questioning his own judgment. Sophia's ranged from angry accusations to tearful pleas, often within the same message. "You've destroyed my relationship with Mom and Dad," she wrote, followed minutes later by, "Please don't cut me off completely. I'll lose my apartment. I have nowhere else to go." I read them all but responded to none, needing time to determine my own boundaries moving forward. The most difficult message came a week after the dinner from Sophia. "The bank is threatening foreclosure on my condo. I have 30 days to make payments, or they'll begin proceedings. Please, Kristen. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm desperate." It was the first time I could remember Sophia acknowledging that she might not deserve something she wanted, and it gave me pause. Was this the beginning of genuine self-awareness, or just another manipulation tactic from someone who had proven herself an accomplished liar? I stood at a crossroads, knowing my decision would shape not just Sophia's future, but the dynamics of our entire family moving forward. After 2 weeks of reflection, I invited Sophia to meet me at a quiet cafe near my office. She arrived 15 minutes late. a habit that once seemed charming to our parents, but now read as a small symptom of a larger pattern of entitlement and disregard for others. She looked different, subdued with minimal makeup and simple clothing, as if trying to physically embody contrition. As she slid into the seat across from me, I noticed her nervously twisting a napkin in her hands. "Thank you for meeting me," I began, keeping my tone neutral. "I've given a lot of thought to our situation, and I've made some decisions." Sophia leaned forward eagerly. "About the money. Because my mortgage is already overdue and they're charging late fees that are just making everything worse." I took a deep breath. "I'm not going to continue the monthly transfers." Her face fell immediately, but I continued before she could interrupt. "What I am willing to do is help you transition to financial independence. Real independence, not the illusion you've been maintaining." I laid out my proposal. I would cover 3 more months of her mortgage at a reduced rate of $2,000, giving her time to find a job and plan her next steps. I would help her create a realistic budget based on her actual income, not what she wished it could be. I would connect her with a financial advisor who specialized in debt management. But I would not continue to fund her lifestyle indefinitely, and any future financial assistance would be contingent on her taking concrete steps towards self-sufficiency. "You're not doing me any favors by enabling me to avoid reality," I told her. "I realize that now. Real support means helping you develop the skills to stand on your own." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the table between us. When she finally looked up, there was resignation in her expression, but also something else. Relief, perhaps. "I don't know how to do any of this," she admitted softly. "I've never had to. Dad always said I was special, that I didn't need to worry about practical things like you did." "Well, it turns out everyone needs to worry about practical things eventually," I replied, not unkindly. "But you're not starting from scratch. You're smart, educated, and capable. You've just never had to apply those qualities to financial independence before." For the first time in our adult lives, Sophia and I had a genuinely honest conversation. She talked about her fears of disappointing our father, of losing her identity as the golden child, of facing a world that didn't automatically make allowances for her. I shared my experiences of building security from nothing, of the pride that comes from earned accomplishment, of the freedom that financial independence brings. By the time we parted, we had a concrete plan and a tentative new understanding. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, not yet, but it was a first step toward a more authentic relationship than we'd ever had. My conversation with our father was more difficult. I requested a private meeting with him away from my mother's mediating presence and Sophia's emotional volatility. We met at a local park, walking along the paved paths as we talked. It seemed easier somehow to have this conversation in motion without the intensity of direct eye contact across a table. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began awkwardly, "about you and Sophia and how I've treated you both over the years." I waited, giving him space to continue at his own pace. "I always saw such potential in Sophia," he said. "She reminded me of myself at her age, creative, full of big ideas. I thought she needed my encouragement to flourish, and you seemed so capable. So self-sufficient even as a child. I told myself you didn't need the same support." "Everyone needs support, Dad," I said quietly. "Children need to know their parents believe in them regardless of how capable they seem." He nodded, his pace slowing. "I know that now. I think I always knew it, but it was easier to maintain the narrative I'd created. The truth is, I failed both of you. I set Sophia up for disappointment by never requiring her to face consequences or develop resilience, and I failed you by never acknowledging your strengths and achievements. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest, and in that moment, honesty felt more valuable than perfection." "Where do we go from here?" I asked. "I don't know exactly," he admitted, "but I'd like to try to build something different, something better, if you're willing." I considered his words carefully. "I'm willing to try," I said finally, "but it has to be based on who we really are, not who you wish we were or who we've pretended to be." He nodded, and we continued walking in a silence that felt, if not comfortable, at least less burdened than before. My mother, when we spoke a few days later, revealed that she had suspected Sophia's deception for some time, but had been afraid to confront it. "I found a past due notice from her mortgage company when I was visiting last year," she confessed. "But when I asked about it, she had such a convincing explanation. And your father was so proud of her accomplishments, I didn't want to be the one to question them. That's the problem, I told her gently. We've all been protecting a fiction because it was easier than facing the truth. But the truth is the only foundation we can actually build on. Over the following months, our family began the slow, sometimes painful process of redefining our relationships based on reality rather than the roles we had played for so long. Sophia found a job as an administrative assistant at a community arts center, not as prestigious as her imaginary gallery position, but honest work that utilized her knowledge of art and offered the potential for growth. She moved to a smaller apartment that she could afford on her new salary, with only occasional help from me during the transition. My father made awkward but genuine efforts to recognize my business accomplishments, even asking if he could tour my company's offices and meet my team. My mother began calling me regularly, not just when family gatherings needed to be organized, but to check in and maintain a connection. 6 months after the disastrous birthday dinner, we gathered again, this time to celebrate Thanksgiving. The dynamics were noticeably different. Sophia talked candidly about the challenges of adjusting to a 9-to-5 schedule and learning to live within her means. My father asked thoughtful questions about both of our lives without constantly comparing us. My mother seemed more relaxed, no longer playing the role of tension diffuser. When the meal ended, Sophia helped clear the dishes, a small but significant change from her previous expectation that others would clean up after her. As we worked side by side in the kitchen, she spoke quietly so only I could hear. "I'm sorry," she said simply, "for taking advantage of your generosity, for allowing Dad to believe lies about both of us, for not being the sister you deserved." I nodded, accepting her apology without minimizing the hurt it acknowledged. "We're both learning," I told her. "This is new territory for all of us." The healing wasn't instantaneous or complete. There were still moments of tension, old patterns that reasserted themselves unexpectedly. But beneath the occasional discomfort was a foundation of truth that made genuine connection possible in a way it never had been before. I learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary both for my own well-being and for the health of my relationships. I learned that enabling someone's delusions, even out of love or family loyalty, ultimately harms them more than helps them. Most importantly, I learned that my worth wasn't dependent on my father's recognition or anyone else's approval. It had been within me all along, expressed through my resilience, my integrity, and my capacity to build a meaningful life on my own terms. Sometimes I think about that pivotal moment at the dinner table, when years of frustration crystallized into a single, quiet statement. "Then my $4,000 monthly transfers can stop today." It wasn't planned or calculated, just the unexpected eruption of a truth too long suppressed. But in that moment of raw honesty, I freed not only myself but my entire family from the web of deception we had collectively woven. Today, as I look at my life, my successful business, and my gradually healing family relationships, I understand something I wish I had known years ago. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop protecting them from reality. True support isn't about maintaining comfortable illusions, but about encouraging growth even when that growth involves pain and difficulty. I spent 32 years learning this lesson, but its value has been worth every moment of the journey. Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone you love? How did it change your relationship? Share your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. And remember, sometimes the most powerful words you can say are the honest ones, even when they're difficult. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to speak your own truths when they matter most.